Hey everyone, welcome back to another Cardboard Herald solo quarantine playlist where we focus on solo gaming topics as well as talking about some of the games that I've been playing solo during quarantine to give you some of my impressions. And today we have 5 games to talk about, which is going to be Beatdown, Streets of Justice, we got Flourish, Pax Pamir 2nd Edition, Pendulum, and Tapestry, including the new Tapestry expansion. But before we get to all of that, as always, we have our topic to talk about. Now, we've talked on this channel a lot about what makes solo board gaming cool, why you might choose to do it, and what are some of the benefits of it. Now, we've also talked about what kind of sets it apart from multiplayer gaming, something that I truly love and still generally prefer, but the more that I play games solo, the more that I realize that it delivers so much more than just an opportunity to play a game that I wouldn't otherwise have the chance to play multiplayer. And I've thought a lot about this, and one of my absolute favorite things about playing solo is the lack of pressure. The only person that is there that is going to be affected by the outcome of the game is me. Now, I'm not someone who takes a game too seriously. I don't need to win. I don't need to lose. But there is a certain exchange that needs to happen when you're playing a multiplayer game, right? There's an expectation that people are going to be trying to win. In fact, I think there's a real famous Reiner Knizia quote that goes along the lines, when playing a game, you should be trying to win. It's the trying that's important, not the winning. The thing is that I don't have as much room for experimentation when I am playing a multiplayer game because it breaks the social contract of playing that game together with your friends. I mean, sure, you can invest in different strategies when you're playing a game, but you don't have that true flexibility where there's not someone relying on you either cooperatively or competitively to be trying your best. But during solo games, that's not the case. Yes, you want to try to win and you want to be able to have a positive outcome and feel like you had a successful experience. But what defines a successful experience may be completely different in a solo game because you're the only one affected by that outcome. So what am I really talking about here? I am talking about achievements. Now, for the most part, I imagine most of you know what achievements are in a video game context. They're some sort of earnable little blip on a screen that is going to tell you, hey, good job, you did something rather unconventional or was particularly challenging. Here's a little notification that you have this reward and you can talk to your friends about how cool you are for having it. Now, there are board games that have implemented achievements actually into the game itself. You have things like Mice and Mystics, which had a whole achievement list that was pretty novel, and it feels good when your team gets these. And then there are games like, say, Terraforming Mars that have the achievements and milestones as a system within the game, but those aren't really what I'm talking about because they're part of the avenues that you must employ or more likely will need to employ in order to have an effective strategy in the game. And I'm really talking about having a list of parameters for yourself where you are going to try things that are out of the box that allow you to really enjoy your games in different ways. But it goes beyond that. It's not just the enjoyment thing. It's that I think with this flexibility, this lack of pressure that you have in solo games, it allows you to understand the framework of games much more. It's just like practicing shooting hoops by yourself. Sure, you don't have the actual opponent right across from you in order to give you that particular challenge, but allows you to strive for different things and work on your particular weaknesses or understand more about the game itself. And that's what achievements can do for us. Now, rather than going through all of my different games that you may not own or, you may not be interested in and talking about the various achievements that I've set up for myself, I wanted to encourage you to come up with some of your own and share some of them that you think are particularly cool for yourself. There are whole lists of achievements out there and a ton of resources. This isn't a new concept, but it's something that I think that particularly while we're in quarantine, while we're spending a lot of time at home by ourselves, we can use this as a way of really investing ourselves in some of our favorite games that may have gotten stale from just playing them over and over again, or to give yourself some new challenges in order to really feel like you're fulfilling something at the table that's different than the standard parameters that you have. Now, I'm going to create a Google Doc that is going to be a list of some achievements that I've come up with for my favorite games, whether I've achieved them or not. And if people comment and reply with their own, then they can go ahead and get that added to the Google Doc, or rather, I'll add it there. And if there is some enterprising and far more BGG savvy user who wants to make a geek list out of it, more power to you. But we now have to turn to our quarantine solo playlist. We got these 5 games to talk about. First, I'm going to talk about Flourish. This game is interesting for a lot of reasons, but in a specific solo context, you're still going to run into some of the best and worst aspects of Flourish. And that is that the game feels very lightweight as you're playing it. It feels like something that you could play without really having to crunch a lot of information. At the end of each round, it's going to check certain things, and depending on the cards that you played, you're going to get certain points. Some cards have end round scoring, some cards just have certain features which will be considered in those. Seems really approachable. But once you get to the end game and you have your final round and end game scoring for all the different things that are going on in your garden, and many of your cards could have end game scoring conditions, then it becomes this real crunchy thing that you didn't realize how complex that the nature of your garden was as you played it. It seems to feel like it's at odds with itself. You may want a lightweight game, but suddenly at the end it feels much crunchier than you expected, or maybe you want a really challenging crunchy game and the act of playing it may feel a little too lightweight as you're doing it. Either way, it takes only about 20 minutes, but it seems to not really fit into any specific niche, which in a way is cool that it sets itself apart, but it is hard to find what is the mental state that you want to be in to sit down and play some Flourish. Now, you also have here Tapestry. Tapestry is a storied game for lots of reasons, but I think one of the best things about it is the solo mode. I made a specific video about the solo, and while there's a lot of discussion about balance in Tapestry, this whole thing that we were talking about in the lack of pressure of an opponent sitting across from you, that you have this expectation to do well, the only thing you have to balance against is yourself in the solo mode and the automated opponent, but who cares about the automated opponent? You either win or you don't, but you still get to wring out the most points that you can possibly get from your particular civilization. Now, the Plans and Ploys expansion, one of the big features of it is solo focus. There's a set of scenarios that can be played as a campaign that have these buck wild parameters. I mean, they can be achievements in and of themselves that are going to set specific restrictions or limitations on you that are going to feel very counter to playing the game in the normal way and pressure you into coming up with creative solutions. Kind of exactly what we were trying to do with achievements here, except a little bit more overhead. One of the things I don't like about Tapestry Solo, which overall I think is one of the better Automa Factory solo modes, is that it does restrict you on a lot of the different components that can be included. So if you are selecting your civilization, you need to take out X, Y, and Z civilizations for normal mode, and then you also have Plans and Ploys has some new civilizations which you might need to take out, and then you may have specific scenario civilizations that need to be taken out as well. And so there is some upkeep in the beginning of restriction, and then there's also going to be the same sort of restrictions applied to Tapestry cards themselves, because they will affect the actual balance or the intentions of the solo scenarios. But the core system for the Automa and the Shadow Empire is really well done. It involves 2 cards overlapping with one another to define what it's going to do for the turn. It has a great escalation for the opponent, and one of my favorite things is that there are different civilizations for the opponents, and they're not the same civilizations that normal players would play with, but they do give that sort of flavor of playing against a real opponent. Now, speaking of Automa Factory, another one of the Automa Factory joints that we have to talk about is Pendulum. Now, this is the storied new release of Stonemaiers that's a real-time worker placement game. Instead of defining your limitations based off of the turns that you can take in a worker placement game, this is defined by time. You have little sand timers that are going to flip. Basically, once you've put someone into a location, you can't activate them till the timer is on its side, but you also can't move them to other locations until the timer is off. One of the really cool things about this is that I think that the Automa Factory has come up with some of their most creative work in order to extremely elegantly, extremely simplistically make it so the pressure is on you even in this real-time game. Because anytime you move a worker in the solo game, which you are inherently playing it the same way that you normally would, but when you move a worker in the solo game, you draw a card, and that card is either going to move what locations are blocked by certain workers, and then it will also tell you to flip certain timers if those timers have run out. One of the timers in the game, as in the multiplayer game, drives how long a round lasts, the purple timer. And you could just not ever move that, giving you more freedom on the green and black timers. But if the Automa opponent flips the purple timer, they get a little acceleration in their points for every one of the time tokens, the counter for the end of the round that they claim by bumping it off. And that means that the pressure is on you in order to flip the timer, which is going to accelerate the end of the round, putting the limitations on yourself. You're incentivized to really force your own end game in this, and it feels like such a brilliant way of approaching how to make a real-time strategy game like this make sense. And by not having that opponent, it gives you a little more flexibility to look at the few avenues that you have for approaching the game in different ways. For the most part, when you're playing with a multiplayer opponent, it feels somewhat linear and limiting because you want to make the absolute best use of things, and you're feeling this pressure of time. So you don't really branch out. You go with what you know because you don't really have time to think about different things as you're playing the game. But in this solo context, you have a little bit more flexibility and that lack of pressure from having someone sitting across from you, that you might investigate different strategies, which could have very real ramifications for multiplayer mode. So if you've never played a real-time game that really worked for you or made sense in a solo context, if you get a chance, try Pendulum. I thought it was really creative. Hard to recommend game in general because I think some of the mechanics involved are kind of competing for what type of people may enjoy them. But I like weird stuff, and I ended up liking that game. Okay, so that's going to bring us to our last 2 games on the list. Now, first off, we have Beatdown, Streets of Justice. And when you pick up this game, the first thing that you're going to notice is the art style. I mean, it's undeniable that this has pretty amateurish art, but in truth, I actually think the artist did a lot of creative things in order to make it come across as charming rather than something that is just kind of bleh. Now, the presentation of the game aside, the game itself, it's attempting to kind of ape some of the overall aesthetic of like classic beat 'em up video games, you know, Streets of Rage or River City Ransom, that kind of thing. but you're not actually like side scrolling or moving along. You have rounds where there's going to be opponents who you're going to fight, and depending on who your hero is, you have certain cards shuffled into a hero deck. And you're going to create these combos, and the combo system is really the killer feature here, and something that felt completely unique and is really intriguing. Like, it's something that you want to invest in more. Basically, it's a push your luck system where you play a card, and that card may impact how likely it is that you'll be successful on the next card that you play. And there's some other resource elements within the game that will affect being able to pull off successive attacks before your round is over. There's penalties for failure in your combos, there's rewards for particular levels of success, and there's tempo elements where certain cards, if they're played in certain orders, are going to be more powerful versions of them, whether they're finishers or something that sets up another combo or is played in the middle. The game is okay. Like, I came away from it feeling like, I've gotten what I need to out of the game. I really love the combo system. What I'd really like to see is this designer to really develop the system and find like a way to really tighten things up where you have a game that all elements of it are just as good and just as profound as that central combo system within it. Now, the last game is the ultimate contrast to that, Pax Pamir 2nd Edition. Now, I hadn't played this during the solo quarantine whole shebang here, but I had played it solo mode in the past, and I just had all these other games that I wanted to try because I'd played Pax Pamir, and, I wanted to make sure that I was hitting on all these other games that I hadn't tried. Coming back to this, now that I've played a lot more solo games, whew, mwah, chef's kiss. That game is incredible. I mean, the multiplayer game is incredible. Like, it's just such a well-designed game that feels like such a cohesive ecosystem of choices where everything is so tightly interwoven and impacts one another. And the solo mode developed by Ricky Royal is so good. It's such an elegant system for defining what is going to be populated on the board during the Wakan's turn, what is going to take effect during the Wakan's turn, the escalation of power that they have. I mean, the game is a really complex system. You're going to be checking the rulebook a lot. You're going to be looking over that Wakan section. You're going to be checking the BGG FAQs to make sure that you're carrying things out. But once you get cooking in this game, it is among the most satisfying solo gaming experiences I have ever had. It's just this really tight puzzle where every move that you make is going to impact what the solo opponent is going to be capable of doing on their turn. And so it's not purely reactive, but you're going to have to keep track of so many features as you play. What's available in the market, how much money is in the market, how much money has been flooded into the game, period. What sort of capabilities your opponents have based off of which favored suit is on the table. And so it's much more of a puzzle than a lot of solo games that I played, where it feels like you can really optimize your turns. Not that there's only one strategy, but you can feel like, all right, I've analyzed it enough. I think this is the best possible thing that I can do here. And then there's going to be some randomized elements based off of another 2-card system that is going to define what cards the opponent radicalizes taking into their court, and what actions that the opponent does. But you have a degree of anticipatory control of some of their possibilities before that happens, but not so much that you can fully plan everything out. It just is one of those games that it looks so great on the table. It feels so smart as you're playing, adapting to different factions based off of whether they're dominant or not, or trying to make sure that no one is dominant and you have enough tribes on the board or in play anywhere, your little cylinders. It is just such a rewarding puzzle and is among the best gaming experiences that I've had, period. I've played it a ton since I recorded this last video, and I can't recommend it enough. If you like really cerebral puzzles, but it has that thematic resonance, then I think Pax Pamir is among the best. And that's how we're going to leave it today. Thank you guys so much. I hope you come up with a lot of great solo gaming achievements, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Let me know if there's some recommendations for games that I should check out that I haven't listed in any of these solo gaming playlists, and if there's any games that I've played that you've since checked out based off of this series and how that worked out for you. Thanks again. Keep on playing. I've been Jack for the Cardboard Herald. If you enjoyed this video, we have all kinds of other reviews, interviews, and recommendations via writing, podcasts, and video here on our channel and website cardboardherald.com. Our content is audience supported, so if you want to show your support, please visit our Patreon. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Cardboard Herald.